So the research projects I had when I was a graduate student, undergraduate and graduate student, first when I was an undergraduate, the professor that I worked for was a new professor, and so he was building his laboratory. He wanted to study atmospheric chemistry, but he had a laboratory that required lasers and gas manifolds and believe it or not, some electrical, which my background in electrical construction came in handy. So I spent the majority of my undergraduate research career building a laboratory. And it was only towards the very end of it, before I left for graduate school, that I actually got to see an experiment be performed. I was mostly designing and building a lab to study chemistry, and did a lot of bolt turning, ordering of parts, designing of parts. I even designed a logic board. I never in the world thought I was equipped to do something like that, and learned how to do things that I never thought I would need to learn when I was an undergraduate. So that research project was more a lesson in construction, which seemed to be a continuation of my background in electrical. But it served me well for when I went to graduate school, and there I studied what we call surface chemistry. It's reactions that take place on a metal surface. And you can think of a catalytic converter in a car. It has precious metals embedded inside, and when the exhaust from the engine passes over this catalytic converter, it converts these products into, it breaks them down into simpler components and presumably not as harmful. It also helps to absorb some of the bad stuff and keep it embedded inside the catalytic converter instead of out in the air where we breathe it. Well, the work I did as a graduate student looked at those types of reactions, but on a very, very small scale, so that we could understand at the molecular level what was happening. And to chemists, that's kind of exciting. I won't get into the details of why, but we learned a lot about the fundamentals of chemistry and how molecules react and how atoms are attracted to one another, that had applications in bigger fields like catalytic converters in the automotive industry, as well as how to take fuels, alternate fuel sources, not just coal and oil, but other biomass type of fuels, and convert those into useful fuels using precious metals such as palladium or nickel or platinum. And the cool thing was I got to use lasers again, and lasers, and the neat stuff that professors build inside laboratories, like an ion cyclotron resonance mass spectrometer. I got to do all sorts of fun stuff like that, and it was geeky, but it was sure fun. And what's kind of neat was explaining it to people, because you're describing to people what molecules do. We can't even see a molecule, but we can tell you what it's doing. It's kind of cool. So yeah, most of my work was, I was a laser chick, and I got to, again, do some building and wrench turning. I worked with diffusion pumps, and most of the time I was a mechanic inside the laboratory fixing things, because in order for you to do your chemistry, the laboratory had to be working, and sometimes things break down. So I spent as much time with a wrench in my hand as I did, again, with a lab coat and beakers and stuff. And then when I became a postdoctoral researcher at Irvine, I, again, was continuing on with the atmospheric chemistry, where I studied using a technique called mass spectrometry, but a different type of mass spectrometry than what I did as a graduate student, to look at some of the components that make up smog. And Southern California is known for their smog, so we had lots of motivation there to learn about these reactions. And the more you learn about these reactions and understand them, the better you'll be at trying to overcome them as problems, and that's what our chemistry focused on there. So again, I got to use a lot of equipment, turned bolts and used wrenches, changed out pump oil as much as I did putting little molecules on metal surfaces and in atmosphere, and studying what they do through a variety of pretty high-tech and cool techniques.